Violent protests erupting at the world's biggest iPhone factory. Chinese workers smashing windows and facing off against police officers. A Taiwanese colonel charged for taking bribes from China. That's for promising to surrender in the event of war with Beijing. The first overseas Space Force unit activates. It's based in the Indo-Pacific region, a move aimed at countering China. Republicans in the House taking aim at TikTok. A letter to the social media company's chief executive suggests the platform may have misled Congress. And China securing one of its biggest ever natural gas deals with the world's top exporter. $60 billion are on the table, but Europe still on the fence over energy goals. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A clash is breaking out at the world's largest iPhone assembly site. Chinese workers now facing off against police. Videos have captured tear gas, destroyed fences, and smashed windows. China has scrubbed footage of the scene from the internet, but some clips made it online in the free world. Here's a closer look.
A violent protest erupting at the world's biggest iPhone factory in China. Workers throwing broken fences at authorities in hazmat suits. The other side backing off in the face of flying debris. A video clip circulating online saying police used tear gas and that the workers fought back. In another clip, a man heard shouting, "Police are beating people up." The clash broke out at a factory operated by Foxconn, Apple's largest iPhone maker. This factory in China's Zhengzhou province is expected to churn out over 80% of the latest iPhone models. But China's zero COVID-19 policy is getting in the way of Apple's holiday plan. Last month, Apple said shipments of high-end iPhone models could be delayed. That's after state-imposed lockdowns hit the factory. Many workers fled the building amid local authorities' strict lockdown policies. Local authorities tried to recruit workers to help resume production, but reports say resentment has been building among workers over pay and sanitary conditions. Video clips show large crowds of workers shouting, "Down with Foxconn." One man tried to smash the divider window of an on-site COVID testing booth in the factory. Videos related to this protest have been scrubbed from the Chinese internet. In a statement, Foxconn said violence erupted at its Zhengzhou factory and that it would communicate with its workers and local authorities to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Chinese media reports say that for new workers choosing to leave the Zhengzhou factory, Foxconn would pay them over $1,000 in subsidies. Juliet Song, NTD News.
China appears to be gearing up for war with Taiwan. As for what's in its war playbook, a recent national security case in Taiwan seems to expose one strategy. On Tuesday, prosecutors in Taiwan charged a Taiwanese senior military officer for taking bribes from a Chinese agent. That's to surrender if a war ever broke out between China and Taiwan. The colonel was given nearly $1,300 each month from China after he was recruited as a spy for Beijing in 2019. He even reportedly took a photo holding a signed letter promising to surrender to China if war started. Taiwan's defense ministry charged the officer with corruption and harming state security, saying the case highlights the serious threat posed by Beijing's espionage. The U.S. has long been concerned about Taiwan's ability to keep technology and other secrets out of Beijing's hands. China views Taiwan as its territory and has never renounced the use of force to bring the island under its control. The Chinese Communist Party has never ruled Taiwan. Washington taking a major step to deter a potential war. On Tuesday, the U.S. activated a Space Force unit in the Indo-Pacific region. It's largely to counter the Chinese Communist regime's aggression. It marks the first Space Force unit established in an overseas command. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
By order of the Secretary of Defense, United States Space Force's Indo-Pacific is hereby activated, effective 22 November 2022.
On Tuesday, at Camp H.M. Smith in Hawaii, the Indo-Pacific Command, or Indo-PACOM, became the first combatant command to host a Space Force unit. The commander of Indo-PACOM, Admiral John Aquilino, shared his thoughts at the ceremony.
It's no accident that it happened here in the Indo-Pacific first. The most consequential theater with 4 of the 5 identified national security threats sitting in this theater, whether it be the People's Republic of China, the Russians, the North Koreans, or violent extremists.
Also at the command ceremony was the Chief of Space Operations, General Chance Saltzman. He explained that the Space Force unit will help deter a potential war with China. Brigadier General Anthony Mastelier is now the commander of the newly activated Space Force unit at Joint Base Pearl Harbor.
Space underpins every aspect of warfighting here, where we must overcome the tyranny of distance on a daily basis, where space enables access to otherwise denied areas, to increase range and lethality of our weapon systems, and where space is key to our ability to project power at the time and place of our choosing.
But any military satellites and equipment the Space Force launches into space may not be free from attacks. In January 2007, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, fired an anti-satellite missile against one of its own inactive weather satellites. And the Pentagon expects the CCP to continue pursuing anti-satellite weapons. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The Space Force unit will provide satellite-based navigation and communications. It will also send out warnings when missiles are launched in the region. The Indo-Pacific region has become more important to geopolitics as tensions in the region grow. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command is also garnering more attention from the media. The agency is the largest combatant command in the U.S., stretching from the west coast of the U.S. to India and from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Top House Republicans are setting their sights on TikTok. That's over suspicions that the popular social media app may have misled Congress about just how much user data it shares with China. GOP Congress members Kathy McMorris Rogers and James Comer wrote to the company's chief executive Tuesday, saying some of the information TikTok provided during the staff briefing appears to be untrue or misleading. The letter cited the app's claim that it does not track U.S. user locations. The lawmakers also asked TikTok to provide drafts of any agreements with the Biden administration that would allow the app to stay active in the U.S. TikTok did not immediately respond to a request for comment. TikTok's owner ByteDance is headquartered in China. Under Chinese law, domestic companies must hand over any and all data to the Chinese Communist Party if officials ask for it. That has sparked concerns about American user data falling into Beijing's hands. Republicans will take control of the House in January, following midterm election wins. The letter could be a sign of tough scrutiny they plan to put on Chinese companies. The U.S. is among several nations taking issue with the app. India's government banned TikTok back in June 2020. A $60 billion commitment, Beijing securing its biggest ever energy deal with Qatar, the world's top natural gas producer. This while Europe remains undecided, faced with soaring energy prices. NTD's Juliet Song has more on that.
The Gulf state is the world's second largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. About 20% of global exports come from the Middle Eastern country. The $60 billion agreement spans 27 years. Under it, China would buy 4 million tons of LNG from Qatar Energy every year. Qatar's energy minister says he's pleased with the deal.
Long-term deals are important for both seller and buyer to make sure that the sustainability of supply is there for countries that need LNG for the long term.
Over in Europe, countries are also eyeing Qatar's energy. But negotiations have been stalled as Europe struggles with a dilemma. On the one hand, it's looking to use LNG to replace Russian gas. Russia used to supply Europe with 40% of the natural gas it needs. But unlike China, many European countries are reluctant to commit to long-term deals. That's because they're looking to phase out fossil fuels to meet climate goals.
All the delegation from China that made it.
Qatar's energy minister said the deal would solidify the bilateral relations between China and Qatar, on top of meeting China's growing energy needs.
A leading financial institute is shutting down its consulting business in China. U.S.-based credit ratings firm Moody's is laying off more than 100 people in its offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. That's according to a Reuters report citing insider sources. On the other hand, Moody's credit rating business will continue to operate in the world's second-largest economy. It provides financial analysis to financial institutions. Moody said recently it was taking steps to align its global workforce with current economic conditions. Beijing's zero COVID-19 policy is driving some foreign companies partly or completely out of China. Others are considering a shift to other countries. Moody's decision to close its China-based consulting follows changes in the country's banking sector, as it increasingly favors domestic services suppliers. China's two-year clampdown on internet giants seems to have entered a new phase. On Tuesday, China's market regulator voiced a plan to amend a law on unfair competition. The change would target internet companies found guilty and slap them with fines as high as a 5% share of the firm's annual revenue. But what qualifies as unfair competition? China's regulator says internet giants are barred from using data, algorithms, technology, or capital advantages to create an unfair boost. That means algorithms can't give users unreasonably different treatment or restrictions by analyzing user preferences and habits. Another new rule would block a business in a position of power from forcing a person or entity to sign exclusive agreements. What's more, the regulator says companies should not block external links or services from their platforms without reason. Penalties for violators range from 1% to 5% of annual revenue. Legal representatives could also be subject to fines, equivalent to a range of $14,000 to $140,000. The changes are open for public comment until late next month. The U.S. appears to have dramatically changed its stance on China in recent years. But is that the true picture? Michael Pillsbury, director for Chinese strategy at the Hudson Institute, says very little has actually changed on the federal level. He authored the book, The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. American Thought Leaders host Jan Jekielek sat down with him to learn more.
Okay, on the surface, it seems there's been a sea change in the understanding of the threat of the Chinese Communist Party, certainly around the general public. But what really has changed since 2013 when you wrote this book and you offered some prescriptions about how to...
2016.
2016. Yeah.
Very little has changed. The basic structure of our largest embassy in the world, 2,300 people, being in Beijing, that has continued. The 50 federal agencies that are in the embassy that cooperate with China. We had more than 60 agreements at one time between the National Science Foundation and their Chinese counterpart, the Ministry of Science and Technology, that the U.S. would share quickly any new scientific discovery made by the National Science Foundation, which funds scientists and universities around the country. And the Chinese at one point, you asked me when I began to change my mind, at one point they said, you know, you've been somewhat slow in transferring these new scientific discoveries to us. We read about this in Scientific American. In this case, it was as nanotechnology. And we haven't received it yet here in Beijing. So the U.S. upgraded our embassy and created a minister counselor for science and technology, whose duty was to facilitate these scientific transfers to China. And how much have federal government departments been aiding China, for how long, and under what authority? Because they never went to Congress to ask to do this. But I would say, if you ask me what exactly has changed since the good old days, the arms sales have been cut off. We continue to encourage the European Union to maintain its arms embargo. The rhetoric has gone way up. Secretary Pompeo talking about the Communist Party as being evil and not the same thing as the Chinese people. That was never said by presidents or secretaries in the cabinet before. I would say the level of investment and trade is going up. So we are not punishing China through investment restrictions or... Now there's talk about more export controls. The entity list, 300 companies in China put on the entity list. But as has been made public in the Wall Street Journal and others, you can apply to continue your trade and sales to Chinese companies that are on the entity list. And the Commerce Department has been very generous with approving these relationships continuing.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. What does the Chinese Communist Party's strategy against the West look like? How can Americans face U.S.-China relations as they are now? Michael Pillsbury, Director for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute, gave insight on steps he says the United States should take to really make a difference. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you soon.